Good morning. My hand today is going to be pocket queens from the cutoff. It's a full table right now. Villain 8 limps. I raise. I've got my cutoff raising range, and I pretty much use this for my ISO raising range as well. We get a call from the big blind and then a fold from that limper. So big blind, I've got 88 hands on him. He's playing 40%, 4 out of 10 from the big blind. He has raised once from the big blind, but that wasn't at a 3-bet. That was that I believe that was raising limpers. His call 2-bets 3 out of 9. We just don't have a whole lot of hands to go off of. What I did was based it on like a 19.6% range. I assume he would have 3-bet queens plus ace king. He has 3-bet. He's got a 3-bet stat here, 3 out of 40. So I know he can 3-bet. I'll say he's going to 3-bet those hands, and then hands like suited aces, the suited Broadway, suited connectors, pocket pairs, jacks, and lower. Some of these offsuit hands that are stronger. We're just going to go with that. I'm not quite sure what else to go off of. It's not as high as this 33%, but I have to assume we had a limper. He might play a little bit tighter just because there is a limper, and I made that raise. So we see flop at 9-8-6. I think overall this is pretty neutral board for us. Yes, I probably have the nut advantage here. Well, I don't think there really is a solid nut advantage because I think both of us have trip 9s, trip 8s, trip 6s. I don't think any of us have 10-7, and I'm not even sure if any of us have not even sure if any of us would have like 7-5. Like I don't include 7-5. I mean, it's just like right at like one of those edges. So when he checked, I went ahead and bet with my queens. I know my queens are probably ahead at this point. I bet half pot. He calls. Jack comes out. I don't think that's a great card. I mean, I definitely think this is a card that I could barrel on, because if I had king queen, now I have a gut shot and it's an overcard, so I could bet. However, Jack 10 now hits their pair, 9-10 hits their pair, so I'm curious what GTO is going to say. I bet half pot. He calls. River's a 5. Now it puts a 4 to a straight on the board. Villain checks, and I check behind. So there's a couple things I wanted to check here. It was the flop in the turn. Should I have bet c-bet? Should I have barreled? And then on the river, this value, should I have gone for a value bet, or was my check okay? I do think at some point Villain, if he had 2-pair or trips, probably could have raised it. I also think that if he was on like a spade draw, he's not calling a bet, but I think he also calls like 9-10, Jack 10, probably 8-10. I don't think he has 8-10, but the like a 1-pair type hand. So let's see what GTO has to say. Went ahead and built it. I did say the villain was going to check unless he showed aggression, because out of these hands he has not donked. So he had five possibilities to try to lead. He did not, so we'll say he's not going to donk. So it's on me. I bet 68% of the time. That's what I should be doing. It's good to see that, yeah, we are betting our pocket pairs, so that would include our trips, our 10s, our over pairs, and so forth. So I think that's good. It is a mixed strategy, but we're going to lean towards betting here. We're going to lean towards betting. Aces is kind of mixed. Sometimes we bet, sometimes we check. Ace king, we're betting. We're checking our clubs, so that's kind of what I think is unusual. And I bet ace queen does the same thing. We're checking our backdoor club draw. I kind of think that it's these hands where we're probably we could be behind if called. So we use some of them for our bets, but we're gonna check those clubs because we get easily back into a club draw, and that runs contrary to what we've typically been saying, which is we would normally go ahead and c-bet when we have some equity. So like c-bet the clubs, c-bet the spades here, because if the club comes on the turn, we've just picked up some equity. We've picked up our backdoor. So we bet, villain calls. We assume he's playing GTO, so he should be raising sets in 2 pairs. We have Jack of Hearts comes out. He checks again. It's on us. We bet a little less since he's called, but we're betting our overpairs now. So if we had aces, we're still betting them. We're still betting our kings. We're still betting our queens. We're betting jacks, but tens now we're checking. We've got our open ender. We bet the flop with tens. Bet flop, he calls. But then on here, we're checking tens, we're checking sevens. So we don't want to get blown off the pot, because we do know that if we bet, we expect to see a raise quite a few times from a hands as weak as top pair. So we would be betting and building up a big pot just with the draw. So looks like we made a correct call with calling, or I'm sorry, with betting. And we get 5 of hearts. That's all right. He checks to us. Now we're going to be checking behind 75% of the time. Some of our queens could bet, some of our kings could bet, but it looks like we are checking those overcards. We're checking trip jacks, trip nines. That seems strange, but I guess we're checking. I mean, we're in position. So why would we be checking? If we bet, he's raising with the straight, but he's calling with the set. So if we bet, he's going to be calling somewhat with top pair, 2 pair. He has a few 2 pairs in his range. Pocket card below the top pair. Not sure why we would be checking here, unless it's just if we bet, then we're going to be too unbalanced. That's probably what I'm considering. Is if we bet, we're too unbalanced. I totally understand checking the top pair, pocket pair below the top card. I totally understand those, because I think if villain's going to be calling, he's going to be calling with at least a 1 pair hand, one pair plus. And when you look at it, the straight is almost half of those. So if you say 13.8 combos for the top pair, we've got 10.7. plus another 1 for 2 pair and 0.01 for the straight. You're looking at, let's say, 14 combos for the top pair versus 13 combos for 2 pair plus. So it's about 50-50. So it's kind of at that break-even point with our top pair. If we bet, are we really getting called by worse? It's a coin flip, and if it's a coin flip, then it doesn't necessarily matter if we bet or fold, because we're probably going to be breaking even on it. So I think lean towards checking, lowers our volatility, our variation here. So it does. I think I'm okay with checking the queens. Now, some of our bets are those queen of spades. I don't have that, so I think our check's going to be appropriate. So what did he have? He showed king queen. Did he have king queen in his range? No. So he should have been folding king queen. So what we're gonna do is adjust the hands. Why he called king queen on the flop is beyond me. But let's see, when we factor in that range, that king queen, let's see what happens to it. So let's go ahead and say, with his call, we'll get rid of sets and stuff. Say he's going to call, he's not going to raise, he's going to call those. He's calling over pair, he's calling top pair. Obviously, going to call middle pair if he played that. Ace high, no made hand. We're going to say he's basically calling all of these overs. 5-4 we'll say is a fold. And then what we're going to do is this flush draw calls, open ender calls, gut shot calls. Oh wow, he's calling like 100%. So let's run this solver and see how that affects our ranges or our frequencies. All right, solver's done. So our bet's going to be like 93%. We're not going to really be checking. We're just going to be betting here, which means we're going to be checking a lot more hands on the turn. So yeah, we had such a wide C betting range. We're going to be checking more. We're not going to be checking 60% or 50%. We're checking 34%. But I think that's gonna change as well, because Villain called with king queen. He called with a gut shot. So we're still betting jacks, queens, and kings. So we're still betting those over pairs, but now we're throwing aces in to our checking range. We're throwing 10s and 7s into our checking range. We're throwing some of our 8s and some of our 6s in with the checking range. We're going to throw in some pretty solid hands into our checking range. Even like ace 8, middle pair with that spade. So we're not automatically going to be throwing out bets with our nut flush draws. So we bet, and then he calls. So let's adjust this again. So let's say he didn't raise. I assume he should. Actually, yeah, we'll leave this in, that he's going to raise 3 of a kind, straights, and 2 pairs now. Top pair still calls, we'll say. Pocket pair below the top card calls. Middle pair, that's like the 10. Weak pair, we'll say he calls with the 8s. Let's say he folds the ace, the 6s. 7 6s calls. 5 6 gut shots. 5s call. 4s. So we're going to put our gut shot, and he obviously called with king queen, which was the gut shot. So he called with his gut shot. He calls with his, we'll say, calls with a flush draw. Yep. Okay, so let's run our solver, and we'll be back. All right, so he called. We're still betting 93%. We're betting a wide range. He calls. Now, what I think is interesting is now we're still betting 100%, because he's going to be calling. He's going to let us know by raise that we're beat. So if he raises, you can see that we're calling trip jacks. We're calling the straight. We're calling trip 9s. Looks like we could hold on. We're going to be calling raising 9s, jacks, straights. Some of the queen jack we're raising, that's going to be for bluffs. I think probably the 9s are also included there to balance. But he's calling big percentage of the time, 66. So we're just going to be betting just relentlessly. So it looks like we're correct. He calls 5 of hearts, he checks, and then it's on us. And now, based on how wide of range he is, calling with the gut shot, it does look like we're going to be betting here. But if we bet, what hands does he call? Set, 2 pair, top pair. I guess he's calling with middle pair and weak pair. That's based on GTO. Would he necessarily do that? I don't know. Let's say weak pair folds. Oops. Oops, 9 of lock. Let's adjust these and say, okay, 3 streets of value, or 3 streets of betting. He's going to call with that weak pair. The 9s. Let's say he calls with the 9s. That's what he calls. Pocket pair below the top pair calls, definitely 2-pair calls, sets call, let's say straights, he raises it. So let's run the solver and see how that affects our play. All right, so I don't think it really affects it too much. We're going to be betting more. We're going to be betting for value because he is calling with weaker cards. So I think based, versus GTO, I think we did right. We bet flop, we bet turn, and then we check behind on the river. But against this player, it looks like we could probably go ahead and go for that third street with our top pair plus hands, figuring that he's going to be calling with all of his nines and at least paying us off. So we go for some value there. So yeah, let's take a note on this player that he's calling so loosely, and then next time we can kind of adjust. So I do have he calls 2 bets from the blinds. He's got 7-5 suited, king jack off, 8-7 off. So if we go back to his out of position, we could probably add these gappers, probably add a few more offsuit hands along with them. Still, we don't know king 10, queen 10, but I think based on how he plays and how often he calls. See, I wouldn't necessarily have considered him to call with those king queens on this hand. He folds out of position two-thirds of the time. So I kind of think he should have, or he would have folded those hands based on his stats. So I think based on what I knew at the time, I'm okay with checking behind on that river. But now we can take a note on this villain and say, oh, he's going to call with king queen on this board, king queen off, and then call with the gut shot on the turn, and that lets us know that he's going to have a pretty wide range. So on that river, we could probably go for some value with like a top pair hand, top pair plus. All right, hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did, look tomorrow for another.